Welcome to the Liberated by Light podcast, where we talk all things addiction.
Gwen?
And I'm Rob. And we're back. So we took a little break. Why don't you tell the folks what we were doing?
I'd be happy to. So we did take a little break. We have been off air for a little while because we needed some time to plan a wedding and get married. So we're very happy to announce that this is no longer Gwen Weiler and Rob Turner, but the Turner family. So we're really excited to do that.
All right. So, yeah, we're getting back into it. So why don't we just jump right in? This week, we're going to talk about the 12 steps and how simple they are versus 12-step programs and how sometimes they're not so simple. So why don't we start kicking it off by answering the question, the 12 steps, how they're simple. What makes them simple?
Yeah, so they are. They're really simple and they're really straightforward. And this might come as a surprise to those who've maybe been through recovery and struggled or relapsed or whatever and felt like it was just impossible to do. But really, when you distill it down and look at just the steps themselves, they're really pretty simple. I like to look at them as broken up into two phases. I look at steps 1 through 9 as like phase 1, and then steps 10 and 11 and 12 as phase 2. So I'll just tell you really briefly what they are. I won't tell you specifically each step, but like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Steps 1 through 9, it's kind of like, well, I like to use this analogy. Imagine there was a hoarder and you wanted to stage an intervention for somebody who was a hoarder. One of the first things you would do is you would show up at that house with a big box of black trash bags and you start cleaning up the house and start throwing them out into a big dumpster, right? And you work tirelessly until that house was clean, finally clean, and you would stand there in the middle of that clean house. There'd be one problem. The next day, it's the hoarder who's going to come back and live there. The hoarder who made the mess in the first place is the person who's going to come back inside of that house. And in order to keep it clean, well, now they need to learn the skill of daily pickup. They need to be able to clean up after themselves, wash their dishes as they use them, throw away garbage, throw things into the trash can. And that's the only way to keep that house clean. So that's what I see, when I look at the 12 steps of addiction recovery, those first 9 steps, those are kind of the steps we go through to clean up the mess. And the mess being all these emotional triggers that we carry in our life that really trigger us and send us into the addiction. Because when we go into addiction, we're really just looking for emotional management, really. We're looking for a quick fix. We're looking for relief from things that, build up that pain. And so what we do there is we clean out that big mess that we've been accumulating for over years. And then in steps 10 and 11 and 12, those are often called the maintenance steps. Those really go together. They're not necessarily successive. You kind of just live in those 3 altogether. And that's where you learn the skills of daily pickup, of daily letting go of your fear and your resentment, the pain, the stress, the worry, those things that we accumulate each day. When we're in our addiction, when we're in that place, it's, that scale has typically just accumulated so much over such a long period of time. Life is unmanageable, so we're running to our relief. Our addiction becomes that place of relief for us. And so once we get rid of that pile of emotions, now again, we just have to learn how to live free of them, daily. We don't want them to pile up again. And so the strategies that we get in the 12 steps, the steps 1 through 9 are very specific. It's kind of like, okay, take an inventory of that pain. Now, here are some things that we do to let go of this big mass of pain, to let it go, to set things right in our life. So now we're living from a place of emotional, having a clean slate. And you can do those steps over a series of days, weeks. They don't need to take a really long time. In fact, I suggest that you don't take a long time to do those first time. Just clip through it, get through it. And then steps 10 and 11 and 12, again, pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Basically, when you find yourself getting dysregulated, when you find yourself in a place of pain, those steps give you some strategies on how to get out of pain. So you see it coming and you're like, ooh, let's give that up to my higher power. So that's one of the steps, basically. And then another one is you maintain your conscious contact with your body state, so that kind of helps you be resilient to those triggers in the first place. One is you're triggered, you try to get calmed down. The other one is, let's also do this to build up my resilience so I'm not as easily triggered. It changes your perspective and your attitude in life. And then the other one is, kind of rinse and repeat, rinse and you repeat, and you tell people about the cool experiences you've had while you go through this. You kind of share this message of hope with other people. And so that's it. That's pretty basic. I mean, like I said, steps 1 through 9, you can do in a series of days, maybe weeks. Steps 10, 11, and 12, I mean, you can work those into your daily life minutes at a time. None of these should be anything that break your life, but just kind of fit into it. So really simple, it's straightforward. They come from the Alcoholics Anonymous book originally. They have since been adopted into lots of different fellowships. Basically, any addiction out there, there's been a community that's been built up around, the 12 steps of addiction recovery in that vein, because the steps themselves are universal. And simple. The book looks like a big, thick book, but really, I mean, there's a couple chapters in here. There's a chapter that says, here's the 12 steps, and then another one that's like, here's how to work them. And one chapter by itself that focuses on that 12th step, because they want to give you a lot of guidelines for like, okay, if you're working with other addicts, here are some things to be aware of and sensitive to, and those kinds of things. But that's it. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
And I think something that's kind of maybe gotten lost over the years is that 1 through 9 really should be very simple. Meaning, if I have an addiction and I've had it for 20, 30 years, and I go to a 12-step program, and I start going, okay, step 1 through 9, I do my inventory. Once I've done that once, I shouldn't have to do it again. No. That should take care of that 30, 40 years expansion. That's like what you're talking about, the hoarder, that big amount of time, that 1 through 9, it's one and done. And I think sometimes people forget it. So they'll be going along and they'll do 1 through 3 or 4, and then something happens, they stumble, they relapse, and then they go, okay, well, now I have to go back to step 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they relapse, 1, 2, 3, 4, relapse, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it just keeps on going and going, and it's just they get caught in this loop of 1 through 4, and it's kind of like a hell, I guess. It's like over and over. They go, well, I failed, so now I have to go back. But what we're trying to help people understand is that 1 through 9, if you get through them, like you said, fast, days, weeks, max months, you're able to get through them. And once you're done, you can just basically shove that out of your mind. And now all you're doing is, from the day you stopped, from the day you finished that 9th step, you just move forward, and all you have to do is figure out what happened in, let's say it was only a month. I haven't checked in with my high power for a month. Okay, what happened? I go through that garbage, clean it out, and forget it. And then if you relapse for another month, you can go through that month garbage, go through it, get rid of it, and get going. So 1 through 9 really is that just big throwaway. 10, 11, and 12 is those months. If it's a week that you haven't checked in, a month you haven't checked in, or whatever, you're able to just take those smaller chunks. Instead of this big 20, 30, 40-year expanse of time or energy that you've accumulated, all of these different things that you could call baggage, you get rid of that, and now all you're doing is maintain. A month at a time, a week at a time, maybe even a day at a time. If you get good at the steps, you can do it a day at a time, and all you have to do is, what did I mess up today? How did I relapse? Small, or how did I get off, or feel weird or funky or whatever. And so as you narrow it down, you get rid of all that baggage. Now all you do is narrow it down until you're just trucking along one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a couple things I'll note there, which I love that you said that. 100%. Yeah, and like once you get to those 9 steps, you cleaned it out. You cleaned out the house, and then you move forward. But the reason why we can do that is because really the whole program, honestly, is really circular. Because step 10. And steps 4 through 9 are kind of the same thing. It's like there's step 10, which is like, as you see things, you give it up, give it to God. See things meaning, not, oh, I was in my addiction today. No. I mean, I was in pain today. I was in fear. I was in resentment. Those things. Because those are the underlying issues to addiction. That's what sends us. So that's what we're doing. We get to the root cause, and we recognize like, oh, this is about emotional dysregulation. So each day you're taking the time to re-regulate yourself, let go of those things. And then, so that's step 10. And steps 4 through 9, all they are is, it's the same thing. It's just, you're just like, oh, Oh, there's a lot here because I maybe have been in my addiction for 40 years, or this is the first time you've done it. Maybe not in your addiction all that time, but you're like, oh, it's all of this stuff that I've been carrying my whole life. And so from that place, you're like, oh, I think I need to get into this a little bit deeper. So it breaks it up into just some additional steps as you're getting rid of that big pile of stuff. But really, ultimately, imagine like your addiction. We look at it as like a mountain. It's not a mountain. Well, I guess maybe this analogy will work, maybe it won't. We'll see. We look at it as a mountain, one big giant mass formation that's in our way and a wall between us and the life that we want. Really, it is a sand pile. And each grain of sand represents pain, something, an experience, something we've done, something we've held on to, something that's been done to us, something we regret, something we're afraid of, something we worried over. It is an accumulation of these grains of sand, of these little moments of pain. And so what we do in addiction recovery is we learn how to get rid of the mountain, but we live free of addiction by living free of the sand. So it never accumulates back into a mountain. But again, it's backwards and forwards, honestly, the same thing. And that's why once you move through steps 1 through 9 and you're living in the maintenance steps, yes, ideally we're doing it like each day because that's the best way. Like if you just think of it this way, if you clean your house once a year, it's going to take more time to clean your house. And so maybe we wouldn't necessarily call that step 10 maintenance steps. If you clean your house once a day, it's going to be a few minutes. If you clean your house once a week, probably a few hours. If you clean your house once a month, you're going to maybe need the day to do it. So that's what it is. Like, how long is it going to take to clean up this mess? And again, like when you talk about like, you mentioned like, how did I relapse today or whatever? When I'm thinking of relapse, for me, generally speaking, coming from the 12 steps from this perspective, I'm never measuring my life based on my addiction. I don't live there anymore. I do measure my life by how clean did I live today? How free did I live from pain? That's what I'm always managing. I'm not managing my addiction anymore. I'm not in it at all. That is just not a relationship I'm struggling with. But the things that created the addiction, the pain, the fear, the resentment, the pain, the worry, all of those things that accumulated, I'm human. That stuff comes into my path every single day of my life. But I never went to my addiction for relief anymore because I learned how to use my higher power for that relief, and it works. My God, God does it better, faster, it lasts longer. And so the addiction, it has no pull to me at all.
Yeah, and I think something, as I look at the steps 1 through 9, I think something that goes into them is we as humans like to beat ourselves up. We'll be our own worst critic. And so 1 through 9 kind of helps you to clean out your garbage. And then you, in your mind, know, okay, I've gotten rid of everything. I've been able to put everything out there and deal with it. And as long as you can let it go, then your mind can go, okay, phew, what a relief. Now I don't have to worry about that 40-year garbage span.
Yeah.
And now I can stop beating myself up. I can stop saying, man, I'm an idiot because I relapsed or I went back into my addiction. You can go, we're done with that. We just need to move forward. What can I do today to, keep from feeling the hurt, the pain that takes me back to that place? Yeah. So you can stop beating yourself up and live, okay, I'm a good person. I'm really, what am I wanting to do? And looking forward in my life, where can I go?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Because really, what's happening with our addiction, it's almost like the addiction is not, I don't want to be insensitive here. I'll just say that the addiction itself only is just a reflection of the amount of pain we're holding, really. If we're...
Well, that goes back to dysregulation.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're dysregulated, something happened to you. Someone was unkind, someone maybe got beat up or worse. Dysregulation just tells you my emotions, my feelings are hurt, or I'm sad, or I'm something. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're reacting to. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we need so the addiction really should just be, look at it as a dialogue, look at it as a conversation. If you find yourself moving into an addiction, if you find yourself moving, even like maybe you're out of your addiction, but you're struggling with cravings or you're struggling with temptation, look at that not as a weakness. Don't be afraid, because like it's the fear, right? It's the fear, the shame, resentment. All those things are what's going to make the addiction have more of a pull. So be very careful, because that makes you more vulnerable. So really, like in that place of either moving into a place of addiction, or not, I will say just into a compulsive behavior, or having a temptation or whatever. Like let that inform you. Be curious, like where's that coming from? I had an example I'll give from a few years ago for me. For me, it was food addiction. I was eating myself to death, very literally, could not stop. And once I moved into recovery and I figured out, like, oh, this is simple. It's like not the complicated program I thought it was for 15 years. Like, oh, it's this. Like, I got this. I dialed it in. And I realized, like, some of the foods I thought I loved that I could not live without at all, I just kind of naturally lost my appetite for them. And I realized, like, oh, I didn't really like that food. I just liked how fast it changed my emotional state. So I was moving into that, that particular food was just like, oh, I can use this as a quick way to change my emotional state. Once I learned how to change my emotional state and become more emotionally regulated by using my higher power, and God did it better, faster, and it lasted longer, I no longer had interest in those specific foods, like several. I mean, I still love sweets and stuff, but there were just certain foods. I'll tell you, it was like, for this story, it was the ice cream Snickers. Like 50 of my pounds were from ice cream Snickers. And but I had this experience. This was about 3 months or so after I had figured it out. I was feeling super peaceful around all foods, even sugar. And I was driving home one day. I was about an hour away from home with my son. I'd taken him to a day camp. And all of a sudden, I was like, I kind of want to stop and get like a ice cream Snickers. Like, I wonder if there's a Dollar General, which is funny because I live in Alabama. Yeah, there's one on every corner, just way in a mile. And so I was like, but my first thought was like, I am thinking about an ice cream Snickers. Like, it wasn't even a craving. I didn't get cravings anymore at that point, but it was like an intrusive thought. And I was like, what the heck? Why am I thinking about an ice cream Snickers? There must be something I need to dial in with my maintenance steps, 10 and 11 and 12, because like this isn't, I mean, I don't eat those anymore. I don't crave them. I don't want them. So I'm like, I must be holding on to some emotion that I missed somewhere, so I thought through the step work 10 and 11 and 12 that I did every day. 10 was like, give thanks to God as they come up. So I just kind of did a quick inventory. I'm like, what am I holding on to that would make me maybe feel like emotionally dysregulated, that makes me want to like go, eat over it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm in fear, because my transmission has started slipping that day. And here I am driving home from an hour away. I've got a car full of children, and I'm a single mom at that point. But I was at that point, and I was like, what am I going to do? And so I was like, I was afraid. And so I'm like, that's something I have to give to God. And so I said a quick prayer. I was like, God, please help remove this fear from me. Like, I'm worried about the car, but help me trust you, and that the outcome will be okay and will be good. And it did, by the way. That's another story. But then I'm like, okay, that's step 10. What's step 11? Conscious contact with God. Conscious contact with my higher power.
Well, and I think if I can interrupt just real quick, I think the key right there was you didn't ask to have the food taken away.
Yeah. I would have been.
You asked to have the fear removed.
Yes.
That's the trigger. Yes. The trigger was the fear. Mm-hmm. So as you were moving through that, that's what people sometimes miss, is that they go, okay, take away my craving, take away my whatever it is. And it's not. Yeah, it's not the craving, it's the dysregulation and the fear or resentment or all those the 4 triggers that we have. Those are what we're asking to be removed. God can take away the fear. He can give you peace, or he can take away the resentment. And I don't resent that person anymore. However, he can show up and do the miracle. But it's like she wasn't asking, oh, take away the craving for the Snickers ice cream bar. She says, take away the fear. I think that's the distinction that will help other people. I think is focusing on what it is that's causing this regulation. We're not worried about the food or whatever the addiction is. We're saying, okay, I'm dysregulated in this area. Take this from me and help me understand. Help me come back down from the dysregulation, become regulated, and now the fear is gone, and I'm no longer craving that Snickers ice cream bar, and now I can move forward.
Hey, spoiler alert, you just told the end of my story. I'm gonna get there. No, but yeah, but 100%. I thank you so much for backing me up to that. I love that you illustrated that. That yes, when the food, like I said, I didn't even get cravings anymore at that point because I'd unraveled this so thoroughly. But I was, that food thought, when that food thought came in, I knew by then. I absolutely knew, like, it's not about the food. It's not about the addiction because I know the base of that is I'm eating over emotional dysregulation. I'm not running to sugar. I'm running away from my feelings that are very uncomfortable. And so, yeah, so thank you. So, yep, so I knew that to be curious in that moment, oh, what am I holding then? I didn't immediately know. I wasn't driving home thinking, I'm afraid my car's busted. I was like, where's the closest Dollar General? But by then I already knew, like, I need to back up a minute and be more self-aware to, like, what's happening. Oh, yeah, I'm afraid. I need to let go of this fear. And so that was my first, and I have to tell you, 100% of the time, always it's 10 and 11, 12. It's those threes. It's this work that we do to, like, let go of things and to be resilient to things. So step 11 for me, conscious contact with God. I was like, well, where am I with that? Because I know it's always going to be one or some of this three here. And so I thought, well, okay, the last 3 nights in a row, I skipped my nightly spiritual work. And because I usually will do some reading and some praying and stuff before bed. But for the last 3 nights in a row, I had been so tired from this back and forth trip with my son each day that I was exhausted. So I'd put him to bed and fall asleep with him. And then in the middle of the night, just, go to my bed. So I hadn't had that time at all. So I was like, oh, I missed that for the last 3 days. And I was holding on to anger or, the fear. So that's totally where the food thought came from. So I dialed that in. I did some service on the way home. That's a great way to, like, move out of a place of, like, craving or whatever. And I didn't know what service to do because I was driving, but I knew I had to get rid of this thought. And so I just kind of asked God, I was like, what service can I do while I'm driving? He gave me a little thought. I made a call. And by the time I got home, like, it was totally gone. I think it's been 3 years. I don't think I have thought about an ice cream Snickers since then. I don't think I've had one. I don't think I've wanted one. And, but again, yeah, so just kind of this idea that really what we're doing is just regulating our emotions and we let God do that for us. And then once we dial that in, manage it, then it can be that fast, that easy.
So we've talked a lot about the 12 steps and how simple they are. So if they're so simple, why do people struggle so much? Have we delved into that?
That's a really great question. Yes, we have. Actually, we have a whole episode dedicated to it. So I'll put that in the link below in the description. But yes, there's a whole episode on why do 12-step programs not work. Now, that's not our blanket statement or claim. Obviously, we know that 12-step programs can work. But the programs themselves often get really complicated. Even though the steps are simple, the programs often that get built up around the steps get really, really, really complicated. And I'll just give a couple short, like I said, if you want to delve in this more deeply, please go see this other episode that we did on this. But honestly, the 12 steps, they have gone through kind of this massive game of telephone. When they were given and outlined in the Alcoholics Anonymous program in 1935, the steps were simple. The program had a massive success rate. But over time, some of the people who were participating were like, hey, well, there are these other things that we're doing, and those help too. And so they added some things on, not steps. Those have not changed. 12 steps are the 12 steps. They can be universally applied to every addiction, to any addiction, because it really is just about dialing in your relationship with our higher power to help us regulate ourselves emotionally. There you go. And so, but the programs though, when people are like, well, this helps and that helps and that helps, then it creates this massive, really like this game of telephone, because a lot of times what you'll see in that 12-step program, the model often is that you come into the program as someone who's new and immediately, you're encouraged to find a sponsor, someone who can tell you what to do and how to do the program. So the thing that I was always told was find someone who has what you want, connect with them, let them be your sponsor, and just do whatever they say. There's a lot I could say about that, but you do what they tell you to do. You work the program the way they tell you to work the program. The problem is that somebody who did all 12 steps and yes, found recovery, but also realized that, hey, Also, I noticed that when I did my conscious contact with God, I did it by like journaling 2 hours a night and making 3 outreach phone calls. That's how I recovered. So I'm just going to tell you to do exactly the way I did it. So make sure for your program, step 11, you have to journal for 2 hours a night and you have to like make 3 outreach calls. Okay, so I've just been adopted as a sponsee. I'm going to do that. No problem. All 12 steps. This is what I'm doing for step 11. Well, then you, as a person going through the program, you might realize that, hey, like when you do step 10 and you're trying to do service to get out of a place of craving, it's really like you found that like there's this place down the road that you could go serve on the weekends and you go there for 3 hours every Saturday and you serve your face off. Plus, you're doing the 2 hours of reading at night, and you're making 3 outreach calls, and you recovered because you did all 12 steps, and you did these things, and you recovered. So now you adopt someone when they come into the program. So you're going to say, "Yep, here's the 12 steps. This is how I do step 10. This is how you have to do it because you got to do it like I did it. This is how my sponsor did 11, and how I did 11. So that's how you have to do it." In each generation, from sponsor to sponsee, you just have these things getting added on. One of the things that we see pretty much standardized in a lot of 12-step programs are the list of tools. So what I just referenced, 2 hours of reading and all that, those will be generational between sponsor and sponsee, kind of adapted between each sponsor and sponsee relationship. But then you have something that's been more universally applied called the tools. So, for a good example, in Alcoholics Anonymous, when people were saying, hey, we have these other things, they kind of help. Well, collectively, they came up with a list of tools that they're like, well, these things really help us. And so they made a canonized list of tools, one of which, just to give you an example, one of them is like a commitment to abstinence, so not engaging in your addiction, going to meetings, using a sponsor and or sponsoring, making phone calls, outreach calls. Those are just a few of these things that have kind of gotten canonized, not within the 12 steps, which are just 12 steps, but have kind of gotten canonized in the programs. So they're like, here's the 12 steps. You will recover. These will help you recover from the inside out. But also here are the tools. And these are kind of guidelines that we followed, some of us followed, and they're really great. Well, they are so over time though, what's happened is that people come into the program and they're new, they're like, how do I do this? What do I do? And they are handed, here's the 12 steps, here are the tools. And so the belief is, oh, you have to do the 12 steps and you have to do all these tools. You have to use all these also. And that's how you recover. And that can get really overcomplicated. 12 steps are simple. The tools sometimes can actually destroy your ability to recover, in my opinion. And that definitely was true for me.
I think it comes to overcomplicated and overwhelmed. So when you have to use all those tools, like if I have to journal for 2 hours, I have to call 3 people, I have to do, go to 50 million meetings or whatever it is, you start to go, okay, how am I supposed to fit that in my life?
It's not sustainable.
It isn't, because if one person might be a single mother, another one might be an older lady or gentleman. You don't know what the person's circumstances are.
Yes.
One might be working 5 jobs just to make ends meet. How do you fit 2 hours of here and 3 calls and all these meetings in 3 or 4 or 5 jobs? So all of these things are so overwhelming to people, and they go, I can't do it. So they give up.
They do give up. And because they don't know how little is required of them in order to recover. They don't know how little is required of them in order for God to come in and make miracles. And the 12 steps, if you read the 12 steps, and I would recommend everybody just read the book. Read the 12 steps. If you read the 12 steps, I promise you will recognize how every single one of these steps can be done privately between you and God. Now, there are a couple exceptions, but even still, like in those 1 through 9, there are some times where you have to make apologies and stuff. Well, of course, that's going to involve another person. One of the steps is you have to.
But even then, that person is representing your higher power.
Sure, yeah, and those things. They come up in the course of your. Wait, what? Oh, well.
When you're talking to somebody and they're helping you work through, where you have to, what is it called?
Step 5, where you dispose that inventory.
Yeah,
you can share with someone else.
It's kind of a proxy for your higher power. You're telling someone and they're helping you work through that.
Yeah, You say that. I mean, definitely. I mean, you still will have that conversation with your higher power too, for sure.
For sure.
But yeah, that disclosure is really important for sure. But yeah, I mean, the steps shouldn't break your life. I mean, you should be. You can be a single mom working 5 jobs, working the night shift, and sleeping until noon, and getting up and doing it all over again. You can still work the 12 steps into your life. Maybe not all the tools though. And if someone hands you, here are the steps and here are the tools, and you think, oh, in order to recover, here's a perfect example. This is one I think probably trips up most people. And a commitment to abstinence. You swear off your addiction forever. If you could have figured that out, what do you need the 12 steps for? What do you need your higher power for? Like, that's a new idea. Come in and like, well, here's the secret to success. You just have to promise to never do it again, but actually not ever do it again. Oh, that's it? Oh, I never thought about swearing it off before. Yeah. I never thought about trying to not give in to my addiction before. I'll try that. You know what I mean? And
I think that's called white knuckling.
Yes.
White knuckling.
And for me, it was you white knuckle and fail, you white knuckle and fail. So for me, when I did believe that these were one and the same, every time I failed to keep my abstinence, I was like, I had failed at the steps. I had failed at the program. I had to go back to step 1 and start over. I'll do that tomorrow, or maybe not. Maybe I'll do it next year. And at some point, it was maybe I just give up. I can't do it. I can't do my part so that God can do his. I thought I was failing at the program, but really I just didn't understand what the program was or wasn't.
So, okay, let's move on to another question, another aspect of this. So, how can someone simplify their program? So they're trying to work it, they're working, maybe they want to start one, or they're already in the middle of one. How do they start it so that it's simple, it's easy, they can, just kind of dive in, get through it, and start, that maintenance type of stuff?
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. If you are someone, okay, I'm going to try to give it in a way that can be applied whether you are new, or someone who's been in the program, or someone who's done it and failed and don't know how to come back, or someone who's trying to come back right now. Here's the thing. Get a copy of this book and read it. Because I think this really, really just cuts through the game of telephone. If you want to know what to do, if you want to know what is required of you and what isn't, go to the source and read it. And again, there's a few chapters that talk about it. It's chapters 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7 of this book. You can read it online for free. You can listen to it online for free. Or you can get a copy for like a couple bucks at any thrift store. For real. So read it, and then you will know what your program, what is required of you to heal. You will also come to recognize what isn't. When I was moving through this process and kind of figuring this out after many, many failed attempts over decades, I was ready to sponsor. Finally, I was like, I'm ready. Like, I'm on this side of it. I'm ready. And I was like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to study this book. Like, I'd already read a lot of it in my recovery, but I was like, oh, I'm going to study it. I want to make sure I'm sponsoring right. And I did. And when I did, I was shocked to go to chapter 7, which is the one dedicated to step 12. In real, because that's step 12. Because I'm like, I'm ready to sponsor. Let's see how it's done. So a big long chapter, a whole chapter dedicated to it. And the word sponsor wasn't used one single time. Not using this book at all. And that's when I realized, like, oh, step 12 is not sponsoring. Like, they're not one and the same. And that changed everything for me for several reasons. I don't use a sponsor now. I don't really sponsor now either. I try to mentor, I try to share the message. I definitely, meet the spirit of step 12 for sure. But I don't sponsor. That's kind of a made up mechanism from the game of telephone.
I think something that has hit me really hard as we've started on this journey and we've started to reach people and people are reaching out to us, listening to some stories of, I was doing this 12 steps and I was in a program, and because I wasn't able to be abstinent, my sponsor dropped me. Mm-hmm. And now I've got a new sponsor and they're making me start over. At step 1. 1 through 9, again, are supposed to be one and done, throw away, and move forward.
Yeah, they're both
so if some of these people that are talking to us are like, I did 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I relapsed, and now I have to start over at 1 again. That's got to be overwhelming. It's got to be frustrating. It's got to be really discouraging because the sponsor, you go from one person to the other, and they're all applying it differently. And it's heartbreaking to hear these people go, I can't get past step 4 or step 5 because I relapse and then I have to go back to one. And then sometimes we hear stories of my sponsor won't let me even start one until I'm absent or until I go do these meetings. And it's just heartbreaking to say, why is this sponsor in the way of, it's like a roadblock to get to the 12 steps to start having that conversation with our higher power. It's just heartbreaking because it's got to be discouraging to a lot of people out there going, they've gone over it. 1 through 4. Oh, I relapsed. Okay. Now back to 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Relapse. Okay. Back to 1. That's got to be discouraging. And it's very frustrating to the people out there. And I think that's why I think a lot of people think it's so hard is that I had to do 4 50 times. 1 through 4 5 million times. It's like, and if you do this 12 steps and you've done it for 20, 30, 40 years, you've been in the program trying to figure it out, going here, going there, going here, going there, trying to figure it out. You've probably done 1 through 4, 5, or maybe 6. I don't know. You've tried to get there, and then something happens. Life happens, it knocks you in the face, and you fail, and you relapse, and you're going, I got to stop back over at 1. That makes it very frustrating, and it's almost insurmountable.
It is insurmountable, and I will put a couple caveats on what you said. Agree. I will say that when you're in that place of like 4 and then you have to start over at 1, 4, or get so far, if there's a period so steps 1 through 9 should be kind of done together. That's a phase. Complete that whole phase. Once you've completed that phase, you can say, I'm done with that phase. Let's say you only get through steps 1 through 4 and then you leave and come back 10 years later. You'll definitely want to start at 1 again because you want that experience of steps 1 through 9. But I will say this, what we do see a lot, going back to what you said, so I just kind of want to clarify what you said. If you're in this cycle of, I get to step 4 and then I relapse, I start eating again, you didn't relapse. You're in the process of recovery. You are expected to be free of your addiction by the time you get to step 4. I was not free of my addiction until I had been working steps 10 and 11 and 12 for months. And because I needed that time to learn how to unravel my emotions and to keep them unraveled, I learned how to do it. Well, there wasn't anybody to explain it the way that I'm explaining it. So a lot of it I had to kind of figure out and understand better and dial in. But once I did, it was like, oh, I know the process. I know how to become emotionally regulated. And then it was like, okay, you know how to do that. Awesome. Now I have to keep practicing it and do it every day to maintain, And so I think the problem is when you have that expectation by a sponsor or from other people in the program, we're like, if you relapse, then you have to start at step 1 because obviously you missed something. No, if you go into any of these steps between step 1 and 9, between steps 1 and 12, and you're like, I must be doing it wrong because I keep moving back into my addiction. No, you're not doing it wrong. You are where you need to be. You just keep going. Whatever's happening with you and your addiction, don't stop doing the steps because we think that we have to qualify for the miracle of recovery by first figuring out how to build the dam ourselves against us and our compulsive behavior. That's not true. It's the opposite. You don't qualify for your miracle by holding off on this dam. All you do is you do the steps and you keep inviting God into that space with you. Be in the middle of your river drowning and let him come to you and he will do it. He's not asking you to dam him. But when you put that expectation on yourself, first of all, it's like, well, what did you need God for in the first place? And second of all, the recovery, your rescue isn't going to feel that magnificent when you're like, well, I've been here holding the dam. What did you do, God? Like, I'm telling you, he can do it. He can come and rescue in your mess. So if you find yourself drowning in your addiction, you find yourself moving back into it, even while you're working the steps, you just keep working the steps. Just keep doing it.
Well, I like what you said just a little bit ago, and I want to point this out, is that she was still struggling with her addiction and still not recovered. After she'd done 1 through 9, that's phase 1, and now you were into phase 2, she was still relapsing. She didn't go back and do 1 through 9. She was working 10, 11, and 12. 10, 11, and 12, 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, over and over and over again, to be able to help her understand. It's kind of like that little bit of, how do I say this? You learn a little bit and then you get more, and you learn more and you learn more. And so this is a conversation between you and God, or you and your higher power, that as you've gotten rid of the 1 through 9 baggage, And now, even though you were still in your addiction, still recovering, still relapsing, she was still doing not 10, 11, and 12 to be able to dial that in. And as she got better at it, this experience, now this next experience, the next experience, the next experience, the next experience, as over that time of getting better, just incrementally getting better, higher up, higher up, higher up, higher up, until she was having less relapses. Until that point when, whether it was 6 months, a year, whatever the time frame was for her, she was relapsing less and less until one day she's like, okay, now I've got this dialed in. 10, 11, and 12 regulates me, and now I don't have to run to the food. I can run to God.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even use the word relapse, because for me, like I used to think that way, and then I'm like, oh, it's all over. I failed. I'm back on day one or whatever. No, because I look at it so different now. So for me, it was like, I'll give a couple examples. One, if I'm thinking of relapse, I'm thinking like, am I getting stuck in my fear and in my resentment and my pain and my worry? That's where I would be identifying as a relapse, where I'm like, I'm just living in chronic anxiety again because I'm so busy trying to like control my circumstances and being worried about them. So I wouldn't even call those like moving into my addiction through that period of time. I wouldn't even necessarily call it a relapse, because relapse is kind of like you have failed and you backtrack. No, that's part of the program. You move forward and you make these incremental changes in this incremental process. So again, going back to the hoarder analogy, somebody who can go in, I grew up this way, y'all. My room would get so dirty. Every time I cleaned it, I would find like 40 pens. I'm serious. I would just like this big jar of pens, and then I'd run out and like clean my room again. It's been 6 months. It gets so dirty. I was really good at it. When my room was so dirty, I was really good at taking a day and cleaning it up and making sure it smelled good. And this was organized here and that was there, and everything was perfect. Don't touch my bed. If you put a wrinkle on it, I'll be so sad. Super good at that. Really bad at the daily pickup. Really bad at making my bed. Really bad at making sure dirty clothes got into my hamper. I was really bad at the daily habits that would keep my room clean. And it's the same way with when we're trying to work the steps. When you go through steps 1 through 9 successfully, you have cleaned out a whole life of emotional garbage. You did it. You did it successfully. That's awesome. Now, that's a different set of skills than trying to figure out how to live free of them every day. And in the beginning, you might find, like for me, like in the beginning, you might find that you're like, okay, you did steps 1 through 9, you feel that cleanliness. If you feel amazing, that weight of all those years of pain is gone. You're like a blank canvas ready for the rest of your life. It's a beautiful feeling, a very beautiful feeling. But then after that, it's like maybe you'll start to feel the stickiness of like, it's been a few days since you've given things to God, and you're like, I just need to give that up. Or maybe a week, or like what you were saying, maybe a month, maybe a little bit longer. You're like, I really need to give this back up to God. I remember that feeling. I remember how it felt to be clean and to have given all of this away to God, all of that pain, and I want that feeling again. So then you'll do it. And like I said, you do that cyclically when you're trying to clean a room. And like when you look at a hoarder, going back to this analogy, sorry, I'm kind of being redundant here. The hoarder who lived with garbage up to their ceiling and cat droppings all over the place with 50 cats in one bedroom. I mean, just think of the worst case scenario of a hoarder. If you went over to their house a year later and there was laundry on their couch and a load of dishes in their kitchen sink and their bed was crumbly, would you be like, you are still hoarding? No. You're going to be like, this house looks lived in. I can see you're still working on things. You know what I mean? But you aren't going to a house that's filled with garbage. It's a different set of skills, and it takes a minute to dial that in, that daily clean. You have to be patient with yourself as you move to that. And don't expect that after you get through 1 through 9, you learn the skill of daily pickup. That takes practice.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of touched on a lot. There was a question I had of like, what was your experience as you worked the program, and what do you understand before and after? I think we've sprinkled a little bit of that through it. But is there something that you would like to share about how you worked the program, what your experience was, as we start to wrap up or whatnot?
Yeah. So it's quick. You can see again. We have a whole episode that we talked about my addiction recovery story, my addiction journey. That was one of the first episodes we did. So that one will go into a little more deeply. That long road of what it looked like. But in terms of answering the question as it applies here, I will say that I spent about 15 plus years trying to manage this program and figuring it out. I thought there were so many expectations. I thought there were so many things I had to do that I had to do in order to recover. First and foremost, that I had to give up my addiction in order for the miracle to work. I thought the best the program could offer, the best that God could offer, was to make me willing and able to white knuckle my way through my addiction for the rest of my life. Because I'd heard all these catchphrases: once an addict, always an addict, one day at a time. You're in a meeting, your addiction's in the parking lot doing push-ups. I thought it was just going to be a life of pain and struggle and temptation, but that God would help me to resist that pain, struggle, and temptation. And so my program, as I understood it, was very overcomplicated, as it was shared with me with sponsors, as I saw it in the literature, as like all of these things. I didn't understand it. And it wasn't, and so I tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed because I misunderstood what was required of me for the miracle to happen. What changed for me was a really just kind of like a divine, I think, course of events that just led me to the right person. Because I went back to the program and I was looking for a sponsor because I had become suicidal. And I was like, I'm in a fight for my life now. Like, whatever it is, I have to just do it. And I just was led to like the right person who gave me the right information and directed me to the big book and said, read it. You read the first 6 chapters before we're even going to talk about sponsorship. Like, you have to know what's going on here before we can even have another conversation about like what happens next. And I did, and that changed everything. Because once I had this book in my hands and read it, I was like, now I see. And then again later, it was like there was still trial and error I had to figure out and move through. Well, as I did, and then I wanted to go back and sponsor and studied it in more depth and realized again, just like, oh, this is what's required. This isn't. And, but yeah, this cuts through the game of telephone and helped me to know what I had to do and what I didn't. And I was so relieved to discover all the things I didn't have to do. It was just so much easier than I thought, and then it was so much more doable. And I will say that all of like thinking that that I was gonna have to white knuckle my way through this, that's so painful. It was a very painful experience to be white knuckling and trying to not do something you don't want to be doing, but you feel that compulsion. Like, it's such a hard experience. And I will tell you that the things that are required, the things I am asked to do by the 12 steps, are beautiful and simple and easy. My addiction recovery, as I have dialed this in and come to understand what is required and what isn't, honestly, it's been the most beautiful and peaceful experience of my life. And my addiction falling away was just a natural byproduct of following the simple 12 steps.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. I think maybe what we could do to end is just share a little bit of experience with what we had from someone not calling in, I mean, giving you a message.
Yeah.
And so why don't you share with our audience of what has kind of happened?
Yes.
And we can wrap up on that. Okay.
Okay, so yes, this is someone who's become dear to me. This is someone who we've been communicating with about the program. She is somebody who had actually come into the 12-step program I'm a part of many years ago and had found some success, had lost a measure of weight, and then over time, like she relapsed. And so it's been years, and now she's like, I got to get back into it. I got to get back into it. So she finally came back. And she connected with me. Like, she saw some of my messages, some of our content, and she was like, hold on, what? Like, let me learn more about this. And so as we chatted, I kind of talked to her about what we talked on this episode, about like really how simple and beautiful this program can be. And this is a message she sent me just over the weekend, and it was amazing. She said, OMG, girl, I just had an aha moment and I had to share it with you. I went to get my brows waxed today, and the shop is near my favorite donut shop. I mean, I go out of my way 30 plus minutes sometimes to go there. On my way to the salon, I seriously thought I would just stop off and pick up a donut or 2 or 3 afterward. I've done that before. But I just realized that I completely forgot about it even before I walked into the salon. And I didn't have another thought about it until now, when I realized that I didn't get a donut, didn't even want one, and I still don't want a donut. That is a miracle. Have I told you thank you today? And that started another conversation between the two of us where I was like, yeah, recovery, that's how it should be. Not the fighting of the desire, but the removal of it. And when we dial in the 12 steps and we realize how simple they are and just do them, this is what happens. That is the byproduct of working the 12 steps and not having it get overcomplicated with the other stuff.
And I love that because it's actually someone who has success, not because of us, but because of, a little bit of listening to the content, but she's had the experience where she was there and she stopped going. Now she's coming back. And to the amazing thing was she didn't want the donut. Apparently it sounded like that was part of her routine. That was what she would do to curb her whatever. And so to have that kind of triumph, it's a good shout out to the person who's done that, where she had the thought because she was going to go do something. And when she got to that place, instead of thinking about the donut, she just totally forgot about it and didn't really remember it until it was too late. She passed the donut shop. She was at home probably. She had probably done some other things throughout the day. Maybe it was as she was getting ready to go to bed, she was like, oh, you know what? I forgot totally about my donuts.
Yeah.
My 2 or 3. And it didn't matter. And so shout out to the person who did that, because that's what it's about. That's what the program, the 12 steps is, and that's what the power can have. So thank you for bearing with us. This was a long one, but remember, you're just one prayer, one miracle away. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.